Dreams or reality? When I was 12 years old, I had a dream in two parts, stretched over 2 nights. The first night I was walking in the desert and suddenly my mother appeared out of nowhere. She desperately wanted to tell me something. She said, "This is a dream, please open your eyes and wake up." I closed my eyes, and when I opened them, I was already awake, but I was completely confused. The second night I walked through the same desert, but my mother was nowhere to be seen. Then I remembered what she had told me and tried to wake up. I closed my eyes, and when I opened them, I found myself on the rack in a medieval prison, where I was tortured by some monsters. There were many other people in this prison, and they were all scared. The monsters looked at me in shock and started telling me that something had gone wrong. This shouldn't have happened. They told me to go back to sleep. I tried, but it didn't work out, and the longer it went on, the more scared they got. Eventually I closed my eyes and woke up in my bedroom. Psycho Troll Doll. When I was 4 years old, I had a dream in which I was chased around the school by a troll doll with a knife. He was 6 feet tall and put a knife to my mother's neck. He laughed menacingly, and his laughter echoed down the corridor. Then he cut her throat. He was holding her severed head by the hair, and her headless body was twitching on the ground. He lowered her head and walked towards me. I turned around and ran as fast as I could. I felt his hand grab my ankle and woke up. Dirty mattress. In my dream it was Halloween, and I was walking when I saw a haunted house. There were a lot of people there, and I went in too. It was very creepy in the house, and I heard someone moan. I followed the sound and found the room it was coming from. Inside, my boyfriend was lying on a dirty mattress, his arms and legs chained to the floor. His face was covered in blood and beaten. I went to help him, but suddenly a dark mass opened the door and swallowed me up. When I could see again, my boyfriend had disappeared, and now I was chained to the mattress. Somehow I knew that the only way to free myself from eternity in this room was to trick someone into coming in to take my place. Wicked Granny. When I was 10 years old, I dreamed that I was in hell, and my grandmother was the devil. She put me on the operating table and cut me with a large knife. Then all her little old girlfriends joined her. They took out my heart and guts, squished them and laughed. Then I looked around and saw my father on another operating table. He was going to have brain surgery. He opened his completely white eyes and started screaming. Murderous paintings. One day I had a dream in which I was in the house with my family. My uncle asked me to go with him. He led me into another room where there were bizarre paintings of the dead everywhere. Suddenly I realized that the people in the photos were my family. I ran back to the other room and found my whole family lying dead in the same poses as in the paintings. I turned around and saw that my uncle was standing next to me, holding a photo of us in his hands. He was holding a saw in one hand and my severed head in the other. Zombie songs are contagious. In my dream, I was watching the evening news, and it said that there was a zombie outbreak in my neighborhood. They said the zombies were apparently singing a tune that made your heart dance to the music. Suddenly I heard some singing outside the window. My heart jumped in my chest. Zombies appeared in the window, broke through it and started tearing me apart. The bloodthirsty tramp. When I was 5 years old, I had a recurring dream in which my parents decided to let this homeless tramp live in our house, but when they weren't looking, he kept trying to kill us. At some point, all the lights in the house went out, and while everyone was looking around for a flashlight or candles, I noticed that the tramp had disappeared, as had my brother. Then I ran upstairs and found that the tramp was holding my brother and trying to kill him. In the dream, my parents eventually kicked him out, but he only came back later, claiming that he had become a different person. And then he'll try to kill us again. The clown digger. I dreamed of an evil clown digging my grave in the yard of our house. I woke up completely scared and looked out the window to see our neighbor digging his front yard. E.T. Earthly evil. It was dark in my dream and I was lying in bed. I got up and looked out of my bedroom window. I saw a figure on the playground across the street. He slowly climbed the stairs and walked to the sidewalk. It was E.T. from the Spielberg movie. He was hunched over, foaming at the mouth. He looked at my bedroom window, stretched out a glowing red finger and pointed straight at me. Then he ran to my house. I jumped back into bed, covered myself with a blanket, and lay trembling all over. I heard the front door open. There was an awkward silence, then I heard quick footsteps coming up the stairs. Outside my bedroom door, I heard wheezing, snuffing and puffing. My bedroom door creaked open slowly. The wheezing slowly got closer and closer until it seemed to me that they were very close to my head. Then the blanket was torn off me and I suddenly woke up. Amusement park of the dead. I had a recurring dream where I was at an amusement park. The sky was dark and overcast. All the rides were rusty and broken, but for some reason they were still moving. At first I thought there were people on the rides, but then I realized that they were actually rotting corpses. Every time the car turned a corner or slid onto a bump, the corpses rolled from side to side. I was the only living person in the whole park. The dream came back probably 3 or 4 times before it finally stopped, and I always woke up sobbing and scared. Evil regrets. I had a dream when I was 7 years old. My whole class was in the auditorium. Then the director came on stage and made an important statement, but no one understood what he said. He went out and closed the door behind him. Then the Rugrats came in through the main door and stood there while we all looked at them. Tommy, Angelica, and everyone else were there. Suddenly, they turned a sickly blue hue and their bodies began to stretch out, making a sound like nails on a board. They stretched grotesquely until they reached more than 8 feet in height. Then they started chasing us. When they touched someone, the person also stretched out and became one of them. We just panicked and ran around the room, but eventually they got to everyone. When my best friend turned into one of them, they all stopped running and stood looking at me cowering in the corner. I was the only one left. Then Tommy reached out to touch me and I woke up screaming. Valentine's Day, Friday, the 13th. In the dream, I was in 2nd grade and it was Valentine's Day. We made postcards for our parents. I was sitting at my desk happily cutting pink heart-shaped construction paper. My teacher came up and said, "I have a special card for you." She gave me a red card with hearts. Inside were the words, "Your mom will die on Friday the 13th. I looked at my teacher in shock and she said, "This is really going to come true." Then I realized that today is Friday the 13th and I need to get to my mom somehow before the words in the card come true, but I froze in place and couldn't move. I woke up with such a shock that I had to go check on my mom. This dream happened 12 years ago and since then every Friday the 13th I have to call and check on my mom to make sure she's still alive. Grizzly bear attack. I had a nightmare when my friend and I were in this forest and came to a clearing. There was a beautiful house with a courtyard and a fence around it. We were walking down the driveway when we noticed a little boy running out to meet us. He was all smiles, waving his hand and shouting, "Hello." As soon as the child was 10 feet away from us, we heard a loud growl and we all froze in fear. We turned around and saw a huge grizzly bear standing on its hind legs and looking right at us. The bear suddenly broke through the fence and rushed straight at the baby. With one powerful blow, he tore off the boy's face, then grabbed him by the head and began to shake him violently. We screamed and ran for our lives as the bear devoured him and his guts flew everywhere. I ran as hard as I could, but I tripped over the roots of a tree and fell on my face. The bear approached me and started eating me alive. I woke up in a cold sweat. First-person shooters become real in a dream. This man brought me to an apartment complex. I had no idea what was going on. He led me into this small room. It was odd and there was only one bare light bulb hanging from the ceiling. There was a padlocked door. He picked up 2 pistols that were lying on a small table and handed one to me. "I'll go first," he told me. He unlocked the door and we went inside. It was pitch black. I didn't see anything. I was shaking like crazy because I was so scared. Then I suddenly heard him screaming at the top of his voice and a shot rang out. Then everything went quiet. I slowly moved forward in the dark, looking for a way out. Then I heard strange noises coming from above. It was like a low growl. I turned on the flashlight and saw 2 of the most disgusting creatures I have ever seen in my life. Before I could react, they pounced on me and the last thing I saw were their red eyes, black hair, sharp teeth and creepy smiles as they devoured me. I woke up trembling with fear. Little Victorian girl. One day I dreamed that a little girl was standing in front of me. She was standing with her back to me, she was wearing a Victorian dress, and her hair was cut short. When I reached out and patted her on the shoulder, she turned around, she had the head of a turtle. I'm still scared to think about it. Because I hate you. In my dream, I was in a dark alley and a big truck stopped in front of me. A tall dark figure got out of the truck and pointed a shotgun at me. I asked, "What do you want?" And he said, "Do I want to kill you?" I asked him, "Why?" Because I hate you and every time I try to kill you in real life, you somehow manage to get away. And then, when he was about to pull the trigger, I woke up. Burning Man. Me, my brother and my little sister were in this huge house, like a mansion the size of a house, and we were upstairs. What to do? I really don't know, but then there was a very loud knock on the front door and it echoed throughout the house. My brother ran down the stairs and, without even asking who it was, opened the door. A pale man in torn clothes stood in the doorway, his hands were raised and blood was flowing down them. Suddenly, it burst into a bright flame. But he didn't die, he just chased us while he was burning alive. Sister in a bag. I dreamed that I was sitting on a bus and holding a large canvas bag in my hands. I looked into the bag and saw my little sister there. She was dying and I had to take her to the hospital. I kept asking the bus driver when we would arrive and he told me that soon. I kept looking in my bag to check on my sister. She seemed to be getting worse and worse. It seemed like we never made it to the hospital and in the end, when I looked into the bag, I found only my sister's bones there. Severed head. I was sentenced to death by beheading for an unspecified crime. They put my head on the block and the blade came down. The next thing I remember is walking around this strange city, walking very carefully and trying to keep my head balanced on the stump of my neck. Dad, you're not funny at all. I had this nightmare all the time when I was with my father, and suddenly an expression of horror appeared on his face. He pointed behind me and let out a terrible scream, and I turned around, expecting something terrible, but nothing happened. He would start laughing, hug me and say he was just joking. And 5 minutes later he did the same thing, and I had exactly the same painful feeling that something terrible was about to happen, but when I turned around, there was nothing there.